Welcome at this first video of Living a Conscious Life. In this episode we are going to research the global consciousness and its connection to your and our individual consciousness. But what is consciousness exactly? The dictionary provides us with the following definition: the state of being aware of and responsive to one's surroundings. In other words, it's the capability to perceive. As a human being, we can perceive by taste, seeing, tasting, smelling, hearing, but also through the mind and our intuition. This sensing is something we do all the time. When we are awake, asleep, or for example meditating. Consciousness seems to concern everything that exists, going from a human being, animal, plant, and even water and stone. Not only there is an interconnection between the different forms of consciousness, but they are also intertangled. Results in small researches in the field of quantum physics, parapsychology, and biology point us in this direction. But would there also exist a earthly consciousness, or let's say a global consciousness? A consciousness that is connected to every human consciousness. For answers we are going to look at the largest experiment which is active even today. We go back in time to 1998 and find ourselves at one of the best universities in the world, called Princeton University. It is at this university where people ask themselves if it was correct what many religions had incorporated into the belief. If it was correct what many old writings had written about. Would it really be true that we are all one and all connected with each other? With the first small experiments, it showed that yes, our consciousness has an influence on the larger consciousness. During these experiments, some interesting things were discovered. The biggest influence of human consciousness upon the earthly consciousness was one being in meditation. 2, we consciousness direct our attention to this higher consciousness. 3, when the emotion compassion is present. And 4, when different people work together while expressing their attention. Once the small experiments were done, they started enlarging the experiment on a global scale. They built small devices that can detect the changes of the global consciousness. Since then they collected the data and researched for the patterns. These measurements show us smaller and bigger movements in the earthly consciousness. These movements of the bigger consciousness can be seen in a certain country or region, but can also be observed worldwide. These movements can be linked to big events from that moment. Events which have an influence on a bigger group of humans at once. Events like natural disasters, terrorist attacks, elections, New Year's Eve celebrations, group prayers, etc. One of the biggest movements took place during the 9/11 attacks in the United States. Here you can see the results in the form of a chart. The peak is the moment of the attacks themselves, and we can also see the data from the hours before and after. The most special thing about this event is that already a few hours before the first attack happened, the global consciousness indicated that something was to happen. It seems that we are dealing with a higher form of intelligence, one which is superior to mankind. This research is just one in many where an invisible world has been made visible to man. This and other researches show us how we as human beings here on Earth are connected with a bigger consciousness as well as with each other. Our most important similarity as human beings is that at the deepest level we are all connected to each other, and this with the cooperation of this bigger consciousness. As human beings here on Earth, we are one population, humankind. It might be wise to take this information more into account in our daily lives, living with compassion for our fellow man, taking more time to look at our similarities like living all together on this planet, taking time to understand the similarity that all humans want the same thing, and that is just being happy. Knowing that we are all one, and focus on the similarities instead of our differences. Because seeing the differences in people carries the seed of argument, violence, and war. Similarities that of peace and love.